Coming in at number 5 we have Colossal Squid. The Colossal Squid, which is not seen by many humans unless they have washed up on shore, they are considered to be the largest and heaviest squid species in the sea, weighing a total of 1,500 pounds and having a length of 33 feet long, as well as being the most elusive and mysterious creatures of the deep sea. The species were first discovered in 1925 when 2 colossal squid arms were found in a sperm whale's stomach. Then in 1981 another one was discovered, and finally in 2003 the colossal squid was collected for further research of this new and crazy species of squid. But to this day very little is known about this deep sea creature. These squids are also known to have the largest eyes out of the entire animal kingdom, being larger than a human head. Unlike other squid species, have hooks on their arms which are very muscular and strongly attached to their arms, and it's said these hook-like things are used to help the squid hold and immobilize struggling prey. Sounds like a horror movie death to me. Due to them being so far down in the sea, little is known about them and their behaviors, but what is known is that they prey on sperm whales. Yes, these creatures are fearless. They see a massive whale and say that's breakfast, which is terrifying. Only a few have been caught, and those couple that have been put on display at the Museum of New Zealand in December 2008. So if you're planning a trip to New Zealand, I would definitely suggest going to see this massive specimen, because the likelihood of you coming into contact with this squid while swimming is slim to none. But then again, why would you ever want to get close to this thing while going for a swim? Coming in at number 4 we have Atlantic wolffish. The Atlantic wolffish comes with a lot of nicknames, otherwise known as the Atlantic catfish, sea cat, wolf eel, ocean catfish, sea wolf, and the most fitting, the devilfish. Their blue-like appearance makes them stand out from many of the other fish species in the deep sea. Besides their unique appearance, wolffish actually naturally produce antifreeze to keep their blood flowing due to their extremely cold environment. One good thing about these scary creatures is that they help control the crab and sea urchin populations, which tend to get out of hand quickly and can have a negative effect on the health of a marine system. They have several fang-like teeth in the front, followed by 3 more rows of teeth inside their powerful and crushing jaws. Even their throats are armed with serrated teeth. If that's not terrifying enough, they can grow as long as a fully grown human is tall, so about 6 feet give or take. Their diets consist of large hermit crabs, starfish, crustaceans, large whelks, and sea urchins. These hideous creatures are known for their quick strikes and even quicker kills, because being a part of the deep sea community, it's a fish eat fish world down there, and thankfully we are safe from them up here on land. In fact, the numbers of Atlantic wolffish in the US are actually depleting due to the overfishing, and according to the National Marine Fisheries Service, they are currently considered a species of concern. If you're an avid fisher in the Atlantic Ocean, try to steer clear from these creatures and let them do their own thing. Coming in at number 3, deep sea dragonfish. This is probably one of the ugliest fish I've ever seen, which is why it fits perfectly on this list, and that is the deep sea dragonfish. Sometimes referred to as the scaleless dragonfish, this hideous creature looks like something straight out of a horror movie, with its sharp transparent teeth, slimy skin, and enormous mouth which can open more than 100 degrees. Even though it's not the biggest creature of the deep sea, that doesn't stop it from eating prey 50 times its size, and that is beyond scary. This creature's teeth are stronger than the teeth of some of the fiercest fish predators like piranhas and even great white sharks. The dragonfish is a ferocious predator and can actually produce its own light through a chemical process known as bioluminescence, but when he's not hunting prey, he can easily disappear into the darkness of the deep sea and lurk in his habitat, 1,600 feet under the surface of the ocean. The deep sea is the darkest and deepest corner of the ocean, with crushing pressure and lack of oxygen and light. It makes it extremely difficult for anything to survive down there. Thankfully, this predator is deep down in the ocean, and hopefully none of us will ever come in contact with this hideous water monster. Coming in at number 2 we have frilled shark. The frilled shark is often called the living fossil due to its appearance, looking like a massive prehistoric eel. They have a dark brown exterior and are almost 7 feet long. These creatures are terrifying due to their 40 rows of curved, razor-sharp teeth, which is a total of about 300 teeth. First discovered in 1876 by zoologist Ludwig Dodelin, who classified this creature as a discrete species of shark, and a few years later, after much research, it was later named its own species in the shark family. Given a name name because of its frilly looking gills, and today there are two different types of species of the frilled shark. Regardless of how many species there are, I don't want to come in contact with any of them. This creature tends to live in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and don't tend to come into contact with humans, but a handful of times they have been accidentally caught by commercial fishermen. Thankfully, you probably will never come into contact with this terrifying creature because the closest they've come to the ocean surface is 390 feet deep, but typically they reside more than 3 times that depth. They live very close to the ocean floor and survive off of cephalopods, bony fish, and smaller sharks. When hunting for food, these creatures move similar to an eel, lunging and bending to capture their prey and continue to swallow them whole with their long and flexible jaws and of course their massive amounts of teeth. Due to the creatures living in the deep sea, they are rarely seen and for good reasons, but there was rare footage that came out in 2007 of one. If you're not too scared, you can go check it out after this video. And finally, in at number 1 we have stonefish. They are known to live in the tropical Pacific and Indian Oceans, and these deep sea creatures have perfect camouflage to look like a rock on the floor of a coral reef. So even if you somehow were around one, you probably wouldn't even notice it was a fish. They are close relatives to the scorpion fishes and consume other reef fishes and some seafloor invertebrates. They don't actively hunt their prey, they just wait for their prey to come to them, waiting hours at a time, and when their potential target is less than their body length away, they will strike. They have some of the most powerful jaws and very large mouths that create so much pressure they are able to easily trap their unsuspecting prey and swallow them whole. This creature is the most venomous fish in the world. It has 13 spines along its back that can release the venom, and this can kill a human within a few hours. They have a potent neurotoxin secreted from glands at the base of their needle-like dorsal fin spines, which they stick up when disturbed or threatened. The more venom that is injected into you, the worse it will be. Their stings cause terrible pain, swelling, necrosis, and then of course death. These horrifying creatures are actually considered a delicacy in many parts of Asia, such as Japan and China. They are usually cooked ginger and put into a clear soup, but could also be served raw as sashimi. As long as they're prepared correctly and their dorsal fins are removed, they are a dense and sweet snack and considered by many to be good for your health. If you're swimming in the ocean, you thankfully won't come in contact with this killer fish creature because they live on the ocean floor, so you won't have to worry. But if you're curious about the stonefish, you can check out more about it on the show River Monsters. They did an episode in 2017. Even though the stonefish isn't the largest creature in the deep sea, it's their venom that makes them the most terrifying. They don't use their venom to catch prey, but it's quite effective when they are threatened and can turn away even the strongest potential predators. Coming in at 5, Kieran Crowan. Kieran Crowan was a large sea monster hailing from Scottish Gaelic folklore, which, according to an old saying, was so large it fed on 7 whales. I quote, 7 herrings, a salmon's fill, 7 salmon, a seal's fill, 7 seals, a whale's fill, 7 whales, a Kieran Crowan's fill. Oh man. Now, while its immense size poses a threat to humankind, it prefers to toy with its prey first. It hides its enormous figure by shrinking down to the size of a silverfish. Then when fishermen catch it in their nets, the monster transforms back into a gigantic beast and swallows the fisherman whole. Nasty. In at 4, Ningen. The Ningen is an Arctic humanoid life form that inhabits the icy waters of the Antarctic, and has reportedly been observed on a handful of occasions by crew members of whaling ships. The Ningen are said to be completely white in color with a length of around 20 to 30 meters. Crew members who have spotted the life form have described it as having a human-like shape, often with legs, arms, and even 5-fingered hands. So creepy. Now, the only visible facial features are the eyes and the mouth, and on one occasion crew members approached the creature, believing it to be a foreign submarine. However, they were wrong, and it quickly became apparent that it was non-man-made, and that it was alive. The creature disappeared relatively quickly, thankfully. Now, most of the sightings seem to occur at night, which makes the creature far more difficult to photograph. However, in pictures that have been taken, the Ningen mostly just looks like ice, so their skin is said to be smooth, almost human-like. No believable pictures have ever been taken, perhaps because the Ningen don't exist, or perhaps it's because of a large cover-up by the government. What do you guys think though? Coming in at 3, Kraken. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster of massive proportions and is described as resembling a giant octopus or squid. It's said to be capable of enveloping entire ships in the grasp of its tentacles and dragging them beneath the depths of the cold, dark ocean. Now, the Kraken for years has been spoken of in tales told by sailors, as well as featured in various works of fiction since the 13th century, and continues to remain popular even today in works like Clash of the Titans. The Kraken is said to roam off the coasts of Norway and Greenland and will attack and and destroy any vessel that crosses its path. Now, since the late 18th century, the Kraken has been depicted in a variety of different ways. However, it's primarily drawn as a large octopus-like creature and has often been based on sailors' observations of a giant squid. Scarier still, the Kraken is also depicted to have spikes on its suckers. Yeah, that shit will f you up. In earlier depictions, the Kraken was more crab-like and far less intimidating than it is today. But the biggest takeaway? Steer clear of the ocean for very many reasons, but mostly steer clear of the Kraken. That's all I'm saying. Coming in at 2, Hydra. Also known as Mother Hydra, this Lovecraftian monster is said to resemble a colossal deep one, and is an enormous humanoid creature with a fish-like face, flapping gills and Piscean skin. She forms the Holy Trinity with Father Dagon and Great Cthulhu himself. 3 entities are worshipped as gods by the aquatic race. Now, there is much debate as to whether Hydra is a great old one or if she is simply a massively overgrown deep one. Now, it should be noted that Hydra and Dagon were both entrusted by Cthulhu to be guardians of his daughter Cthulhu, a duty which they perform in one of the Deep One's mighty submarine cities beneath the North Atlantic. Pretty damn cool. And finally, coming in at number 1, Leviathan. Leviathan, not to be confused with the roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland, is a sea serpent monster of immense size and first appeared in Jewish belief, referenced in the Hebrew Bible in the Book of Job, the Book of Isaiah, and the Book of Amos. It is described as a primeval monster defeated by the god Hadad. And draws comparisons to dragon and world serpent narratives. Now, the Leviathan of the Middle Ages is a little different, and was used as an image of Satan, endangering both God's creatures and God's creation by threatening it with the waters of chaos. Leviathan is classified as one of the 7 princes of hell, and is the demon of envy. More interesting still, Leviathan represents the element of water. The element of water in Satanism is associated with life and creation, something that Leviathan seeks to destroy. Coming in at 5, Goblin Shark. The Goblin Shark is perhaps the ugliest animal in the entire world. Not shaming, just stating facts. Also known as the living fossil, the Goblin Shark lives up to 1,300 feet deep inside the sea. What is terrifying about these creatures is that they can detach their whole mouth from their body in order to get their prey. How f***ing terrifying is that? They can grow up to 3.5 meters and love hunting teleost fish. They have flabby bodies with small fins with nail-like teeth and are quite different from other sharks as they are the strongest looking and, again, perhaps the ugliest sharks in the ocean. They have a pinkish appearance, sometimes red when they are old because blood vessels can be seen through its skin. The camouflage color of its skin helps it hide in plain sight, allowing it to catch prey undetected. They're very rarely seen in the deep oceans and were first seen on the coast of Japan in 1898 by naturalist Alan Alston. Now it is visible in all oceans, but mostly in Brazil, the Gulf of Mexico, France, Portugal, and Senegal. In at 4, fang-toothed fish. Fang-toothed fish are the deepest living fish ever found on Earth. They can survive 5,000 meters below sea level, which is absolutely crazy. The pressure at that level is 500 times than that of the land. Their teeth are in proportion to their body size, making them one of the scariest deep sea creatures we have ever come across. Their eyes are situated on the top of their heads and comparatively smaller in size. Not only that, but they have scales on its skin which are shaped like plates, and their fins are small and spineless. They are a big fan of thriving in oceans with tropical and temperate temperature, and it can go as deep as 5,000 meters and hence one of the deepest living creatures in the entire world. Like me, it avoids sunlight and only goes to the ocean surface during the night. Same. Despite how it looks, it is in fact harmless to humans, so don't fret if you see one during a late night paddle. They are instead a big fan of squid and fish, and locate its prey by detecting chemical signatures of other fish varieties in the water. Coming in at 3, giant squid. This squid is giant, in case the name didn't give it away. They can grow up to 14 meters, which is the equivalent to the size of a 5-story building. Yep, terrifying. More terrifying still, they are so big they can eat small whales. Whales! The first ever image of a giant squid was taken by Japanese researchers in its natural habitat, and it's believed that there are many species of giant squid exist, but as per genetics research. The largest known squid species can be seen in all oceans. However, as of right now, they have only been discovered in the Gulf of Mexico, the Sea of Japan, the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii, the Southern Oceans, and California. Giant squid can grow up to 59 feet in length, making it one of the biggest animals on the entire planet. I hate this so much. While on the topic of appearance, the giant squid has a large head with 8 arms and 2 tentacles used for grabbing prey. Not only that, but it also has an incredibly strong jaw, similar to a parrot beak. The species are a big fan of eating other squid, fish, and shrimp, and according to different researchers, they can also attack and eat small whales, as previously stated. I hate them. In at 2, humpback anglerfish. Right off the bat, I hate anglerfish. I hate their stupid light bulb and their stupid teeth. And this dude is no different. Humpback anglerfish are perhaps the most terrifying deep sea creature you will ever come across, just because of how it looks. The species are grey to dark brown in colour and have a large head with a big crescent-shaped mouth, full to the brim with sharp teeth, which are also translucent. What the f? They live up to 2,000 meters below the sea and use their light to see their prey, which is actually an antenna located on its head. They can swallow prey twice their size and use their bioluminescence that produces symbiotic bacteria when in the dark to attract them. Now, the humpback anglerfish is widely distributed in almost all oceans across the world, and more interesting still, the species have a lateral line that can sense the pressure and movements in the surrounding ocean. That's too much power for my liking. Finally, coming in at number 1, frilled shark. Frilled sharks are typically found thousands of feet below surface and most commonly in the Suruga Bay area of Japan. They are very similar to sharks in the sense that they have very dangerous three-pointed teeth. Known as the living fossil and mostly seen at Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, this guy is just straight up terrifying, and he loves eating bony fish. He has a flattened head and an incredibly large mouth with around 300 teeth arranged in 25 rows pointing in a backward direction. His body is elongated and is brown in colour. Now, typically sharks don't have a nictitating membrane, that is a thin but tough membrane considered as an eyelid that moves horizontally with the eyes. However, this shark has that, and uses it to protect its eyes during potentially dangerous situations. Not only that, but its skeleton also contains less calcium, likely because it lives so deep underwater, which is poor in nutrients. In at 5, sirens. Hailing from Greek mythology, sirens were supposedly dangerous creatures who, according to the legend of Odysseus, the sirens would lure nearby sailors with their enchanting music and singing, which would cause them to shipwreck on the rocky coast of the Sirens' Island. The ships would be wrecked and the sailors aboard would perish either by drowning or slain by the sirens themselves. However, what makes these creatures interesting is that whatever they did to their captives is unknown, but has been implied throughout mythology that they ate the unfortunate sailors. Savage. Now, when Odysseus sailed towards the island housing the sirens, he ordered his crew to tie him to the mast so that he could hear the siren songs without being led astray. Smart mans. The crew were also ordered to plug their ears with beeswax so that they could not hear. In turn, Odysseus' ship passed safely by the island. Now, these mythological monsters were believed to combine women and birds in various ways, often represented as birds with large female heads, bird feathers, and scaly feet. However, throughout history this depiction would change, with them now being represented as female figures with the legs of birds, with or without wings, playing a variety of musical instruments, particularly harps. They've also been depicted as beautiful women whose bodies, not just their voices, are seductive. Now, according to Ovid, the sirens were the companions of a young Persephone. Demeter gave them wings to search for Persephone when she was abducted by Hades. However, Demeter would curse the sirens for failing to intervene in the abduction and were ultimately fated to live only until their mortals who heard their songs were able to pass them by. In at 4, Jormungandr. Hailing from Norse mythology, Jormungandr, meaning huge monster and also known as the Midgard world serpent, is a sea monster and the middle child of the giantess Angbodr and Loki. Now, according to mythology, Odin took Loki's 3 children by Angbodr, the wolf Fenrir, Hel, and Jormungandr, and tossed the latter into the great ocean that encircles Midgard. The serpent then grew so large that it was able to surround the entire earth and grasp its own tail. As a result of this, it received the name the World Serpent. When this monster releases its tail though, Ragnarok will begin. Frightening stuff. Once the beast releases its tail, the seas will become violent as the serpent thrashes its way onto land. Fenrir will set ablaze one half of the world with fireballs, while Jormungandr sprays poison to fill the skies and seas of the other half. The two will then join the sons of Muspel into the plain of Vigrid. Here is where the last meeting between the serpent and Thor is predicted to occur. Thor will become occupied with battling Jormungandr, and they will be unable to help others as they fight their own battles. Thor, however, will eventually kill the serpent, but will fall dead after walking just 9 paces, having been poisoned by the serpent's deadly venom. Tragic stuff, this dude is not to be messed with. In at 3, the Kraken. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster hailing from Norse mythology and is a creature of enormous proportions, meaning an unhealthy or twisted animal. The Kraken was borrowed for one of the main antagonist monsters in Ray Harryhausen's Clash of the Titans. This creature is often described as a cephalopod and resembling a giant octopus or squid. The Kraken is said to emerge from the depths of the ocean and envelop whole ships in the grasp of its tentacles and drag them beneath the murky waters. Now most will remember this sea monster also making an appearance in the second installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean, which featured a more mythologically accurate depiction of the Kraken as opposed to the 2010 remake of Clash of the Titans. Now its true mythological history goes something like this. After returning from Greenland, an old Norwegian author described in detail the physical characteristics and feeding behaviour of the Kraken, proposing that there must be just 2 in all of existence, stemming from the observation that the beasts have always been sighted in the same parts of Greenland Sea and that each seemed incapable of reproduction, as there was seemingly no increase in their numbers. And while that fact may put some minds at ease, there is no denying the impact the Kraken has had on popular culture and sailors alike, with many fearing beneath those murky waters are elongated tentacles waiting patiently to feast. In at 2, Dagon. Dagon is a deity who presides over the deep ones, an amphibious humanoid race indigenous to Earth's oceans. Now this bad boy was first introduced in Lovecraft's short story Dagon, but is also mentioned extensively through the mythos. Also referred to as Father Dagon, he is a great old one and the consort of Mother Hydra. Now Dagon is huge, really huge, and could potentially reach a height of 50 feet. He is an enormous monster and is worshipped by the devout cult of humans and deep ones, who revere him as their deity. It is rumored that he is immortal, however his longevity may be attributed to his fraternization with the Starspawn, who will oftentimes select specimens from a given species to protect, nurture and empower for reasons only known to them. Now Dagon is aptly described in the short story, I quote, "With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. This is not a beast you would want to stumble across on a dark night." And finally in at number 1, Cthulhu. Cthulhu is a fictional cosmic entity created by our favourite writer over here at Top 5 Scary, H.P. Lovecraft himself, and was first introduced in the short story The Call of Cthulhu, which, if you haven't read it, get on it immediately. Cthulhu is a great old one of great power that lies in the depth-like slumber beneath the Pacific Ocean in his sunken city of R'lyeh, and remains a dominant presence in the eldritch dealings on our world. Now it's near impossible to describe Cthulhu, however the most detailed descriptions come from the Call of Cthulhu and are based on statues of the creature. One of these statues, constructed by an artist after a series of baleful dreams, is said to have, I quote, "yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon and a human caricature, a pulpy tentacled head surmounted, a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings." Horrifying, right? Worse still, this oceanic monster has a loyal group of followers. It is unknown how large the throng of worshippers are, but his cult has many cells around the globe and are noted for chanting horrid phrases that translate to, I quote, "In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming." So what happens when Cthulhu emerges from his slumber beneath the ocean? Well, the story says that, I quote, "the thing cannot be described, but it is called the green sticky spawns of the stars, with flabby claws and an awful squid head with writhing feelers. All I can say, folks, is that if Cthulhu awakens, there's trouble for not just you, but for all of us. You have been warned."
Kicking off at number 5, Charles Vane. Yeah, exactly. Did you get those 10 points? The man in chains that met his demise at Gallows Point in the legendary Jamaican town of Port Royal, way back in 1721. Charles Vane, in many ways, was perhaps the archetypal pirate. He seized opportunity wherever it presented itself, and more so than many of the more respectful buccaneers, Charles Vane was an incredibly violent and bloodthirsty individual. He was believed to have been born sometime in 1680 in the then Kingdom of England, before finding his way to the Bahamas as a young man, where his piratical career began. By 1717, Charles Vane had become such a successful privateer that his machinations led him to being one of the most prolific leaders in the newly founded Republic of Pirates in Nassau, alongside the likes of Calico Jack Rackham, Stede Bonnet and Sam Bellamy. From here, Charles Vane ravaged his way across the Bahamian waters in his fleet of pirate vessels, vessels, the Lark, the Ranger and the Catherine. He became feared by sailors alike for his cutthroat cruelty, often torturing sailors from the ships he captures just for the sake of it. Things didn't end too well for old Charlie though, because by February 1719, Vane and his pirate fleet were caught in a storm off the Bay Islands, and his reckless decision making forced his crew to mutiny, where they marooned him on an uncharted island in classic pirate fashion. Here he was picked up by a passing British ship, recognised as the wanted criminal that he was, and finally met his end after being brought to Port Royal, where he was tried and hanged for piracy in March 1721. Coming in at number 4, Bartholomew Roberts. Barty Roberts, perhaps the most successful pirate in terms of amassed wealth in the whole of the golden age of piracy. Born John Roberts on the 17th of May 1682 near Pembrokeshire in Wales, he would eventually go down in history under the nom de plume Black Bar, although that particular title was never used during his lifetime. It is often debated as to whether Roberts was born a peasant or into a family of wealth, but nevertheless he took to the seven seas at the ripe old age of just 13, where eventually he worked his way up to the rank of second mate on the slave ship Princess for the East India Company. And while this is where things got a little bit interesting for Barty Roberts, as the Princess was besieged by a fleet of pirates led by Captain Howell Davis and later captured. The pirates offered the crew two choices: die or become a pirate. Turns out Captain Davis and Roberts got on like a house on fire. They were both Welsh and conversed often in their native tongue, and although he was reluctant to become a pirate, he soon saw the advantages of the liberty and freedom that came with it. In fact, following Captain Davis's death at the hands of a Portuguese ambush, the crew later elected Roberts as their new captain, despite only being a pirate for a few weeks. Thus began one of the most successful careers in piracy ever seen, as his crew's loyalty and admiration for Roberts began to grow alongside his fearsome reputation and expert seamanship. In total, Bartholomew Roberts captured over 400 ships in his career and amassed nearly 500 vessels in his pirate fleet. His raids led him from Brazil and South America to the west coast of Canada and eventually Africa. Ultimately, Roberts was killed in battle near Cape Lopez, his death shocking the Royal Navy and the pirate world alike. But before his body could be captured, his crew fulfilled his final wish: burial at sea, wrapped in his ship's sail. His remains were never found. Next up at number 3, Edward Teach, aka the one and only, the notorious privateer Blackbeard. Now you might be thinking that number 3 is pretty low for a legendary pirate such as Blackbeard, but the fact of the matter is, Blackbeard was actually a pretty decent guy, and as far as gruesome torture and bloodthirsty violence goes, he was on the tamer side of piracy. Instead, Blackbeard relied on the illusion of fear and the theatrics of the dark arts to strike fear in the hearts of men, and boy, did he find success in that. Contrary to popular belief, Edward Teach spurned the use of any force, and was far removed from the modern day picture of the tyrannical pirate he's so often depicted as. He commanded all of his vessels with the consent of his crews, and there is no known historical account of him ever harming or murdering those that he held captive. Blackbeard was a shrewd and calculating leader, commanding his infamous 40-gun ship, Queen Anne's Revenge. He would often board a ship in an ominous cloud of smoke created by the slow matches that he would light in his beard and hat. It was also heavily rumoured that Blackbeard was involved in voodoo and the dark arts, but it's also highly likely that it was a rumour started by Blackbeard himself. You see, the terrifying legacy of Blackbeard is down to the mystery that he permeated. In all likelihood, we will never know his true name, as Edward Teach is often believed to be a pseudonym alongside the many other names that are associated with him. Nevertheless, that was the point of his notoriety, and seemingly he became one of the most iconic pirates in history while still being a pretty decent dude. Nice one, Blackbeard. Swinging in now at number 2, Ching Shi. And where do we even begin? Because when it comes to pirates, Ching Shi is without a doubt the most successful pirate in history, commanding the largest pirate crew ever assembled, the Red Flag Fleet, 300 ships consisting of anywhere between 20,000 and 40,000 pirates that ravaged and plundered the seven seas for over a decade. And still, she died in her own bed as a free woman at the age of 70 after retiring and running a successful casino in southern China. Born in 1775, she became a Cantonese prostitute working in a floating brothel in Guangzhou. In 1801, she married the notorious pirate Cheng Yi, and following his death, she utilized her shrewd opportunism to gain control of his fleet. From then on, Ching Shi ruled the oceans with an iron fist, beheading anyone who stepped out of line and ruling over her Red Flag Fleet with a strict pirate's code that often resulted in cruel and violent punishments for any broken rule. The thing is though, despite despite her tyrannical punishments, it worked to a startling efficiency, allowing the Widow of Cheng to ultimately rule over tens of thousands of pirates. Her ability to coordinate such a large pirate fleet pitted her against entire navies, and she often skirmished against the British, the Chinese, and the Portuguese, plundering and reaving with ease by sheer numbers alone. In fact, she was such an iconic pirate that after her eventual capture, the Chinese government granted her a pardon, and in her later years she served as a military advisor when battling against the British Army in the First Opium War of 1839. Her success as a pirate is completely unrivaled, and her legacy alone remains an extraordinary feat of history. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Ned Low. Because whilst Ching Shi is without a doubt the most successful pirate in history, our number 1 spot is reserved for perhaps the most cruel. Edward Low, otherwise known as Ned, was actually only active as a pirate for 3 short years, but during that time he committed some of the most violent and heinous acts ever seen throughout the golden age of piracy. Born into poverty in the year 1690 in Westminster, London, Ned became a thief and a pickpocket at an early age. After a taste for crime as a young man, he soon caught a ship bound for the New World, where he briefly settled in Boston, Massachusetts. After his wife died in childbirth, Ned decided to take out his rage as a pirate, and thus began one of the most bloodthirsty reigns in piracy. Ned Low preferred to maintain a small fleet of 3 or 4 ships, and during his brief 3-year endeavour, Low and his crew captured over 100 ships, burning the vast majority of them after torturing and murdering their crewmen. During one particular pillage, fearing capture, the enemy ship's captain threw his loot overboard, abandoning it at sea. After discovering what he'd done, Low sliced off the captain's lips with a dagger, then cooked them in a frying pan and forced the captain to eat them. He made a man eat his own lips. And then he massacred the entire crew and burned the ship to cinders. The thing is, little is written about Ned Low because he was such a force of cruelty and hatred. In the words of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Ned Low was a savage and desperate man, a man of amazing and grotesque brutality. Unlike the romanticised notions of the likes of Blackbeard and Captain Roberts, Ned Low was a true psychopath who saw the opportunity of piracy to satiate not just his criminal endeavours, but the darkness of his own soul. The true meaning of a dread pirate. Skull and crossbones and all.
Number 5 on this list is a mistake. So I know that's kind of weird. How do you discover a mistake? Well, in a story from One Dumb Diver, and yeah, that is their actual handle, they do just that. They write, "When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. That was mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 90 feet when I was only rated for 60. While diving, I spotted a 3.5 meter mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds. Curious, which is harmless, and lunch. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I'd been trained to do since there was no way for me to escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields, which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away, but back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve, the idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I make a perfect move to give it my arm. However, just before the crunch, it occurred to me that I'd left my sleeve on my bed. I had my knife drawn, however now I had a series of problems. I had a huge open gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water and trailed blood everywhere. Once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water, and salt water and open wounds, they don't feel too good. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down into my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. So that story right there, folks, is why I personally don't think I'm ever going deep sea diving. I love sharks, they're super cool, I love to learn about sharks, but I am more than happy to keep them in a tank at the aquarium and learn about them in that way. Swimming with them or discovering one in front of you on the day that you also forgot your protective gear, not something that sounds like a great time. Number 4 on this list is a barracuda. El Herrera 9519 writes, One time when my parents visited Mexico, they went diving and my mom was slightly lower down than my dad, looking at the ocean floor. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. My mom looked below at all the critters when my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up and a barracuda was directly in front of her, staring intently at the shiny necklace. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace and then slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore, but still pretty unsettling, and taught my mom to be a little bit more aware of her surroundings when diving. So I looked it up, and barracudas can grow to be 1.8 meters in length. Pair that with their extremely sharp teeth and the fact that shiny objects remind them of the little silver fish that they eat, and you have yourself in a pretty bad situation. The woman in this story is honestly extremely lucky that this fish waited to decide if it was going to attack or not. Most times she wouldn't have had time to respond and it would have just gone to take a bite. Considering this necklace would have been around her neck, having a barracuda bite into it could have ended very badly. Number 3 on this list is a kelp forest. Duct Tape Jedi writes, after a day of boat diving in Monterey Bay on the California coast, we had a night dive planned. I was there with 2 friends celebrating my birthday, and we were part of a larger group of divers. My friends were too tired for the night dive, and I was too, but I got invited to buddy with another diver whose friends also decided to stay on the boat. So I was following my new buddy through the kelp when some of it caught on my tank. I tried to pull clear but managed to get tangled even more, to the point where I was unable to move. I kept shining my light around looking for my buddy, but he was nowhere to be seen. After what seemed like an hour but was possibly just a few minutes, I felt some of the kelp loosen up and then saw that my buddy was cutting it off with a knife. I was so exhausted after struggling that when we got to the surface, he had to tow me back to the boat. So discovering a full-on kelp forest, I mean, that would honestly be really cool, I think. Obviously, what happened to our diver would have been incredibly scary though. Having to wrestle for over an hour, or however long he was there for, with some kelp in the dark, probably thinking that you're going to drown, doesn't sound great. But if you did discover a kelp forest and that didn't happen, then I think it'd be pretty sweet. If you're going to go though, then make sure you carry your own knife, because you wouldn't want to end up like our friend here. Number 2 on this list is a body. This story is from Texas Guy 911, and he says, I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced cave divers than I was. I'm leading the dive as to get used to the pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession, and they're mentoring me. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass, so we follow a line put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another. So I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat, but I don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. I'm the first in the group, and I get to the boat, and I see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. It looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. It's hard to see due to so much muck in the water. So I touch the boot, thinking it's by itself, but it won't lift, like it's attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out, pants, the calf, and now I see the second leg. I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascend to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. Nobody wants to go to the surface, but it's a rule that if one says up, others in the group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what's a diver's sign for a corpse? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though I'm trying to stay calm and take time. So we're on the lake's surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So I tell them there's a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I'm serious. I describe in detail what I saw, and then we go down again. Once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backward, as there are several boats on the line, and who knows in which boat the body is in and how far we drifted while taking it out on the surface. Well, we find all the boats before seeing the original one, of course. So our customary leader goes into the boat's cabin and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So gluing information together from what we learned later on, it actually turns out the police or some other agency had body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed, anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. So that didn't turn out to be an actual body, but I still think this would have been super scary. To feel a leg and then another leg in the darkness of the water like that on one of your first dives, I mean, that would be a lot. Maybe I'm just weak because deep sea diving is just not for me, but honestly, that would have scarred me for potentially life, whether the body is real or not. Number 1 on this list is a survivor. Off the coast of Nigeria roughly 8 years ago, a tugboat broke down and sank to the bottom of the ocean. 3 whole days later, a diving crew went out to the wreckage to see what was down there and recover the dead bodies. It was thought that no one could have possibly survived the crash and that all 12 people on the boat were dead. That's why the crew was so shocked when they found someone had actually survived. Maybe this doesn't seem as scary as finding someone who had died, but we're lucky enough to have the actual clip of them recovering this person and just watch as the hand comes out.
Alright, you found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive.
The startled dive team discovered the tugboat's cook had survived for 3 days.
So that one image of having a hand reach out of the dark and stormy nothing would have actually terrified me. Not to mention that man who survived down there. That would have been 3 days by himself surviving in this tiny air pocket, most likely believing that the world has left you for dead. This is definitely one of those scary discoveries that's for the better, because someone's life was saved, but as the Reddit user Edgar writes, I can't imagine how creepy and unexpected it would be to be on a mission to recover the dead and have a hand reach out to you like it did. Number 5 on this list is a giant eel. This is a true story that comes in from a Reddit user, RCMW181. They write, an old World War II ammunition ship off the south coast of England was full of brass-topped shells. Most had been taken by divers over the years and it was now very rare to see them apart from a pile in one corner of the ship. The pile of shiny brass metals was miraculously untouched and remarkably clean after spending years underwater, and you only found out why if you swam near them. Out of the murky darkness, the largest eel I have ever seen snakes forward. Without exaggeration, this thing had a head the same size as a horse's head full of jagged teeth. I could not see the body as it looped into the dark and deeper into the ship. No one got near those shells. Turns out for years this thing had been guarding the shiny brass shells, slithering over them, making them shine. We found out at a bar later that he was famous in the area and many people went to the wreck just to see him. No idea why this giant creature was guarding them like a dragon and its horde, but some said eels are like magpies and like shiny things. There are multiple scary discoveries in this story in my opinion. First off, our Reddit user just glosses over the fact that they're in a sunken World War II munitions ship. They don't say so, but I would have imagined that people would have died on that ship when it sunk, and there may have even been some remains of the dead still down there. Then to come face to face with a giant eel that is extremely protective over these brass shells would be terrifying. If that was a giant moray eel, then those creatures can grow up to 2.5 meters in length and can be very deadly in the water. Had that creature interpreted what our diver was doing as threatening, then they may not have made it to shore later that day to be able to share the story. Number 4 on this list is a freezer. This story from a Reddit user is just all kinds of creepy. Count_Dynamo writes, I've done a number of dives, and the strangest thing I ever saw was a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very rusted and the deep freezer itself had to have been 30 years old, probably more. This was about 90 feet just off of Vancouver Island, Canada. The situation gave myself and the other divers the heebie-jeebies. Logged the GPS and depth coordinates and notified the police. We were able to find out what was inside since one of the divers had friends with the local police. 10 porcelain dolls. Now for starters, I'm actually kind of happy that they found porcelain dolls inside that freezer, because when I was initially reading that story and heard about a freezer that was locked up and weighed down, I initially thought of a dead body, but having 10 porcelain dolls raises a lot of questions. Were these dolls potentially cursed and that was the only way to get rid of them? If you've ever come in contact with a cursed doll, then locking it up is the first thing to do. Ed and Lorraine prove it with their handling of the Annabelle doll. If these dolls are cursed though, then this discovery gets even more scary. Clearly, whoever locked them in that freezer threw them to the bottom of the ocean and didn't want them to be found. Bringing them back up to the surface probably wasn't the best idea. Number 3 on this list is a color change. Now, a color change doesn't really sound that scary at all, but in this particular case, it's definitely pretty creepy. A diver writes, I was diving off the coast of Fiji and we went through a natural tunnel, like a 10-meter cave/passage through a rock formation. So we start swimming through the cave and suddenly the light was weird, like the blue tint from the water has been replaced by a red one. Now all divers will know that this isn't only weird because the color changed, but also because red is the first color to disappear after a certain depth, usually between 30 to 40 feet, and we were well over 70 feet. Also bear in mind this was late morning on a sunny day. So imagine this scene, me and my dive buddy are going through an underwater cave and suddenly everything, for no apparent reason, is tinted red, a color that you were literally supposed to be unable to see while diving at that depth during the day. Upon exiting the cave, everything was back to blue. I thought it was just me, so I didn't signal to go back up. After the dive, my buddy asked me if I'd seen the water tint red as well. We can't explain it, and the folks from the local dive shop had no idea what we were talking about. Now that story is super weird. We've got to keep in mind that these guys were 70 feet below the surface at that point. If I was 70 feet below the surface and everything changed colors to a deep red, I would be very scared for my life. Obviously we don't know for sure, but it sounds like that cave that they stumbled upon is haunted by something. It's either haunted by something or that particular cave can produce some strange light phenomenon. Either way, it would have been very frightening, and I'm glad that the two divers in this story made it out okay. Number 2 on this list is a school of sharks. The next discovery comes in from a professional diver in the Bahamas who was diving down to recover a dead body. What's crazy about this story is that the dead body isn't the scary part. His online name is Keith Ba, and he writes, "After an hour or two of searching, I went back into the blue hole to see if there were any signs of him. Saw the glint of his watch and his arm sticking out near the bottom. Started descending down to the bottom to recover the body. On the way down, realized that the bottom was a school of sharks that must have been there for breeding. So many sharks that they blocked the view of the actual bottom. Descended into darkness, grabbed his arm, couldn't stand to look at the body, and started ascending. The sharks followed and were circling around the both of us. Had to take a break at halfway at around 60 feet as to not get the bends. Extremely scared. The entire time waiting to normalize being super scared. Victim was struck by a passing boat." So not only is finding a dead body underwater super scary in my opinion, but to stumble upon so many sharks that you can't even see the bottom of the ocean, that's beyond terrifying. Then to have said sharks follow you up to the surface, deciding whether or not they're going to eat you, would have been absolutely brutal. He didn't specify what type of sharks they were, but after doing some research, sharks tend to get far more aggressive during mating, and therefore the risk of our divers getting attacked is significantly increased. Also, the number of sharks that can gather during mating season can rise into the hundreds. One shark is scary enough and will likely win in a fight, but tens to even hundreds of them would have easily had their way with this diver. Not sure about you guys, but if that was me, I would be exclusively a land dweller from then on out. Number 1 on this list is a person. People aren't typically scary discoveries, but in this case by some deep sea divers, it definitely was. One diver writes, "Me and 2 buddies were on a night dive in the Puget Sound hunting prawns. It was about 1 AM and we're a good 100 feet deep, the darkest black you could imagine. We used to do this thing on night dives where we'd get in a circle, turn off our lights, then stir up the water and watch the bioluminescence float around us like floating stars in a black watery space. Only this time, we turn off our lights, stir up the water, and the water glows just enough to reveal a 4th person sitting in our circle. We were at a dive resort, so it wasn't so odd to see another diver, only it was 1 AM and we'd see nobody else prepping a dive at the dock. He was also alone, which was odd considering the dangerous conditions of a night dive in those waters, and he had no fins or gloves. I don't know how he swam so well without fins or didn't get hypothermia without boots or gloves. We wore dry suits because it was so cold, but this dude was in a wetsuit with exposed skin. We thought we saw a giant gash on one of his legs. So the 3 of us all notice him and we're too scared to move. I can hear my buddies panting in their regs and the guy just smiles, waves, and then swims away. Whenever you think you're alone and someone just shows up like in an alley at night, it's weird. 100 feet underwater at night is terrifying. After reading this story, I got some serious ghost vibes. Now obviously I can't know for sure and those divers didn't either, but this man just appeared out of nowhere and had a giant gash on his leg. He also wasn't wearing the proper gear and they didn't see him enter the water when they were getting ready to go. Potentially, rather than just be another diver out and about, This is the ghost of someone who went diving and died. Now their spirit just swims through the ocean for eternity. I've read a lot of ghost stories and reports of sightings before, and that has all the telltale signs of one. Number 5 on this list is Sinkhole Sam. The legend of Sinkhole Sam originated many years ago in Kansas. Sinkhole Sam is said to live in Inman Lake, or as the locals call it, the sinkhole. It's believed to be a 15-foot long serpent-like creature that is as round, and I quote, as an automobile tire. The people who claim that this serpent was 15 feet and round like an automobile tire are Albert Newfield and George Rager, 2 witnesses of the beast. These men are some of the many people who have stumbled upon this creature and have spoken out about it. Based on the reports, people believe that Sinkhole Sam is a type of prehistoric serpent that has managed to survive over the years. Now, back before Kansas was even colonized, there were lakes and rivers all over the terrain, making it a perfect spot for an animal like this to survive. As time went on, the area dried up and locals believe that Sinkhole Sam took up residence in Inman Lake. As the years have passed though, the sightings of Sam at Inman Lake have been fewer and farther between. However, the sightings of a similar creature at the Kingman State Lake have grown. This lake isn't too far from Inman Lake either, only 50 miles. 15 miles is certainly a long distance to go, but maybe not for a massive serpent like Sam. Sinkhole Sam, in my opinion, is one of the most likely creatures to actually exist. Unlike other sea beasts that are very far from any living animals that we have in our world, Sinkhole Sam, from most accounts, is just a big snake. I think it's super possible that someone has spotted a massive snake over the years in that lake, and through word of mouth, the story has been exaggerated over the time to become the legend of Sinkhole Sam. Now, if Sam is real, then we should all be in the clear, because even though a 15-foot serpent may be terrifying, there have been no reported attacks from Sinkhole Sam on humans since the legend began. Number 4 on this list is Leviathan melville. This ancient beast is aptly named after the Leviathan due to its incredible size. This is a monstrous whale that grew from 45 feet to 60 feet in length. It has the largest teeth from any animal used to eat the world has ever seen, reaching a length of 1.18 feet. Their heads were 10 feet long and their jaws were absolutely massive. Similar to Megalodon, these creatures are long extinct and lived roughly 12 million years ago. Also similarly to Megalodon, they had the exact same diet as the massive shark, whales. That's right guys, this massive whale ate other smaller whales. Also, because it was competing for the same food source as Megalodon, it's not unrealistic to think that those two creatures would have fought several times. And before I go any further about this beast, comment down below who you have in a fight, Megalodon or this Leviathan of whales. I want to know who you guys got. Anyways, over the years we've seen many legends about massive whales that were extremely aggressive. Moby Dick is one of the most famous stories of all time and features a massive whale. This creature, however, would have put Moby Dick to shame and potentially would have even had it for lunch. Also, after it was finished eating Moby Dick, it would have happily eaten Captain Ahab and completely demolished his whaling ship. A lot of other entries on this list have had some reported sightings and witnesses, but this one we have real fossils to prove its actual existence. I've personally always been a fan of whales. In fact, an orca whale is my favorite animal in the whole world, but making an orca whale 60 feet with massive teeth is what we have here, and that might be a bit too much for me if I'm being honest. Number 3 on this list is Ninjin. Ninjin are very strange mythical creatures that have only come into the limelight very recently. The rumors and legends of these creatures have largely taken place in Japan. Japanese whale research boats that are sent to the Arctic waters have reported seeing these massive 20 to 30 meter long creatures that are completely white swimming through the ocean. Now, when I first heard that, I thought that these things might just be big whales, but their shape is unlike anything that we've ever seen before. These creatures are said to look almost human, with witnesses saying that they saw massive legs and arms coming from the beast. They also have eyes and a mouth, but not many other facial features from the reports. For just over the last decade, stories about Ninjin in the Antarctic waters have circulated throughout Japan. One of the most famous was when crew members on the deck of a ship saw what they thought was a submarine in the distance, but when they approached it, realized the creature was alive and watched as it dived quickly underwater. There are some photos that have surfaced on the internet, but nothing that can fully substantiate the claims of this creature's existence. It is also currently unknown if there's only one of these creatures or if there are several of them swimming around the seas. This beast, unlike some of the other creatures that we've talked about, is not just a bigger version of an already existing animal. It isn't just a big snake or a big shark, it's a completely different entity entirely. This makes me think that it would be harder for somebody to confuse a big whale with a creature like this, because a whale doesn't look anything like a ninja. Hopefully more sightings and evidence can come to light soon, and we can get a definitive confirmation if this thing is real or not. Number 2 on this list is the Oklahoma octopus. This mythical octopus is said to inhabit some of the bigger lakes in Oklahoma, like Lake Thunderbird, Ulaga Lake, and Lake 10 Killer. The sightings indicate that this is a very large, aggressive octopus that we wouldn't want to mess with. Many deaths in these lakes have been linked to this octopus, or octopi if there are multiple of them. What's very strange about this creature and what makes a lot of people skeptical is that typically octopi don't live in freshwater areas. They're capable of doing it for a short time, but they never live there for extended periods. That being said, there have still been multiple sightings and reports of this creature living in these lakes. It's said to be the size of a horse and has a reddish-brownish skin tone to it. It eats what any other octopus would eat, but has a tendency to kill humans in its area. The reasoning behind this is unknown though, because it doesn't actually eat the humans, but only drowns them. Potentially the octopus feels threatened by humans swimming in its water and is very territorial. There's no physical evidence proving the existence of this creature, but the rate of drownings in these 3 lakes that I mentioned earlier, they're far higher than anywhere else in the area. That statistic, along with the numerous sightings from fishermen and swimmers, have locals believing in the legend of the Oklahoma octopus. Number 1 on this list is Organism 46B. Organism 46B is believed to be a massive 33-foot long squid-like creature that was said to have 14 different tentacles. This thing lived in Vostok Lake, which is a subglacial lake located under 2 entire miles of ice. This creature has the ability to animate its legs after they've been amputated, it's capable of shape-shifting, it's extremely intelligent and also extremely hostile, and it has the ability to immobilize its prey with a toxin that it could spray up to 150 feet. We've only actually known about this creature for a few years. Although the Russians initially established an Antarctic base on top of Vostok Lake in 1957, they actually weren't aware that there was a lake beneath them until 1974, and then they weren't able to get to the lake until 2012. It was only after that that they discovered Organism 46B. After they drilled all the way through the ice and got to a point where they could send divers down there, they discovered this creature. Sadly, the discovery was a deadly one though. Dr. Anton Padalka, a researcher at the site, is quoted saying, "He tread water wearing a blissful smile as the organism approached him. We watched helplessly as it used its arms to tear off its head, then popped its remains in its mouth. It was as if it had hypnotized him telepathically." This ability to completely lull its prey into a sense of calm is apparently what this creature's venomous spray is capable of doing to people. Padalka had some more interactions with this beast, but it didn't take long before the Russian government came into the mix and sent a specialized team into Vostok Lake to extract the organism. The fact that any of this news even made it to the public is pretty marvelous, considering the Russian government wanted to keep it under wraps as much as they could. Hopefully there aren't any more of these dangerous beasts lurking in the subglacial waters waiting to strike. Well, there you have it. Number 5 on this list is the Lochness Monster. Nessie, as many people refer to this creature, is said to be a huge, long-necked, almost dinosaur-looking creature that lives in Scotland. This creature of the deep specifically resides in Loch Ness, a 37-kilometer loch located in the Scottish Highlands. The legend of this sea creature went worldwide back in 1933. A photo was released to the public showing a strange creature's head protruding from the water of Loch Ness. The world went into a frenzy after that photo got out and the legend of Nessie began. Ever since that point, many sightings have been reported, other pictures have been taken, and even sonar readings have indicated this creature swimming in the loch. All of that being said though, we've never had indisputable proof that Nessie's real. Well, I'm here to tell you that Nessie is real, but maybe not how you expect. New Zealand scientists have taken samples of the water in Loch Ness and have studied the DNA that they found in it. Professor Neil Gamel, a geneticist, is quoted saying, "Well, our data doesn't reveal their size, but the sheer quantity of the material that says we can't discount the possibility that there may be giant eels in Loch Ness. Therefore, we can't discount the possibility that what people see and believe is the Loch Ness Monster might be a giant eel." So, the Loch Ness Monster, as we understand it, might not be real, but potentially this loch is full of giant eels that resemble all of the features that Nessie is reported as having. Maybe this is why we've had such a hard time proving this myth, because for years, people have been looking for the wrong thing. I really like the legend of the Loch Ness Monster and honestly want it to be true, but if it had to be giant eels, then I think I could accept that as well. Number 4 on this list is the USS Stein Monster. The USS Stein was a Knox-class destroyer ship in the United States Navy. The ship was eventually decommissioned from the American Navy and was transferred to the Mexican Navy in the 90s. That wasn't before it was attacked by a massive sea monster though. In 1978, the USS Stein was attacked by an unknown entity which we now refer to as the USS Stein Monster. This monster was said to have been a giant, with some people estimating its size up to 150 feet in length. The ship was sailing in the Pacific Ocean when it was attacked. Technical difficulties with the ship started going wrong, and eventually they brought it back into the port. Upon inspection, the sonar system was completely damaged. There were cuts and gashes over 8% of the ship, with some of them being massively deep. They also found suction cups like those of a squid attached to the ship. After investigation of the suction cups and the gashes, it became clear that what they were attacked by isn't your standard animal. Even a giant squid would have had a hard time doing what the monster did to the ship. Ever since that point, the legend of the USS Stein monster has grown. Obviously, this monster has to be real because it has actually attacked a ship. Sadly, we don't know a whole lot about it though. In truth, we know less about what's on the ocean floor than we do about the surface of the moon. So it's very possible that a creature we aren't familiar with yet is dwelling down there. Number 3 on this list is Megalodon. Would this list really be complete if I didn't include the ancient king of the sea? Eleanor Imster writes, scientists think that Megalodon looked like a stockier version of the great white shark, with strong, thick teeth built for grabbing prey and breaking bones. Regarded as one of the largest and most powerful predators who have ever lived, fossil remains of Megalodon suggest that this giant shark reached a length of about 60 feet. Their large jaws could exert a bite force up to 24,000 to 41,000 pounds. That is a massive, massive animal, guys. Multiple times bigger than the great white sharks we have today. This thing was so big that it would actually eat entire whales. Now, many myths have surrounded Megalodon and its existence since scientists first brought this mammoth of the sea up. Estimates say that Megalodon went extinct roughly 2.6 million years ago, but some people don't buy into that theory. For quite a while now, the legend of a giant shark still living amongst the ocean has had a lot of people wondering if it's possible. If Megalodon was still alive, is it possible that we still wouldn't know about it? How could we miss a creature this giant? How many of them would there be left in the waters? There are surely a lot of questions that come up if you believe Megalodon is still a reality. If this creature was still alive, then people think the Marianas Trench is where it's located, a place so deep and uncharted that it's hard for us to know for sure what's down there. I'm personally not convinced this creature still roams the ocean, but comment down below your thoughts. Is Megalodon still alive? What do you think? Number 2 on this list is the Kraken. The Kraken is one of the largest sea monsters that is said to exist. It all started in Nordic folklore many hundreds of years ago when sailors told tale of a massive beast that preys upon the waters of Norway, Greenland, and Iceland. This fearsome beast was said to pull entire ships to their doom and eat every human on board. The first account of the legend was in 1180 by the King of Norway at the time. Since then, sightings of the creature and lore surrounding its capabilities have grown through the years. Fiction writers and movie makers have also latched onto this creature and included it in many stories. As cool as it would be though, to our current knowledge, the Kraken itself isn't real. However, something similar to it definitely is. The giant squid. The giant squid is a massive squid that's said to be able to grow up to 13 meters in length. Sightings have even put this creature at 20 meters before, but those have never been proven. Even if 13 meters is the maximum length, that's still a large animal and something that would frighten anyone if you're seeing it for the first time. Many experts believe that the legend of the Kraken happened when Norwegian sailors stumbled upon this giant squid, and rather than name it a giant squid, they called it the Kraken. As time went on, the legend spiraled out of control until we got this massive sea monster which attacks boats. Now, even though that might be a bit far from the truth, could I believe that there was one giant squid that was potentially bigger than the rest? Absolutely I could. I could also believe that this giant squid might have attacked a ship or two in its time and maybe even brought one down. If it did do all of that, then there really wouldn't be any difference between this squid and the Kraken. Either way, if you see a massive sea creature with tentacles coming after you, I'd just swim the opposite direction. Number 1 on this list is the Hook Island sea monster. It was first spotted by Robert Le Sarec in 1964 off of Hook Island, and after he saw the monster, he went on to describe it in detail. He said, It was only when we got to within 20 feet of the serpent that we could see its head clearly. The head was large, about 4 feet from top to bottom, with jaws about 4 feet wide. The lower jaw was flat like that of a sandfish. The skin was smooth but rather dull, brownish black in color. The eyes seemed pale green, almost white. The skin looked more like that of a shark than an eel. There were no apparent scales, nor did we see any parasites around. We supposed the flexible tail would have shaken any off. There were no fins or spines, nor were there any apparent breathing openings, although there must have been some. Perhaps we didn't see them because our attention was focused mainly on the creature's menacing mouth, the inside of which was whitish. The teeth appeared to be small. A fragment of some dark substance hung from the upper row of teeth, possibly a fish. As the monster was lying on the sandy bottom, we could not see the color of its belly. The creature was about 90 feet long. Behind the head, the body was about 2 feet 4 inches thick and remained that way for about 25 feet. Then it gradually tapered into a whip-like tail. The general color of the body was black with 1 foot wide brownish rings every 5 feet. The first starting just behind the head. The skin was smooth but dull. So that's his description, and after he and his family saw it, he took some pictures of the creature to prove his claims. We have to remember that these pictures were taken in 1964 and doctoring them would have been far more difficult back then than it is today. I also tend to believe this claim more than most based on the level of detail he described the beast. Obviously it was a pretty jarring experience if he was able to describe the creature in that much detail. Since the claims, people have researched Hook Island for this monster, but with no luck. Hopefully one day we can spot this monster again and know for certain that it truly exists.